Hey everyone, it's Mr. Kabbalah. This is going to be Algebra 1 homework from eMath instruction on unit number 9, lesson number 4, solving quadratics using inverse operations. Let me know if you have any questions. Enjoy!
All right, so we're going to solve these by using inverse operations. Inverse operations are opposite operations. So for letter A, I'm going to get the x term by itself. So this is also going to include anything in parentheses. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. So for letter A, I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to get x squared is equal to 98 divided by 2 is 49. And then the inverse of squaring something is taking the square root. So instead of x squared, I can write x as long as I take the square root of the other side. And the square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. All right, for letter B, because this is in parentheses, I'm going to actually take the square root first. So I'm going to do x plus 3 to get rid of the square, but then I have to take the square root of the other side. So I have x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 5. So then I'm going to subtract 3. So I'm going to get x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 5. So that means we have two answers. Okay, just like over here we had answer of positive 7 and negative 7. Here we're going to have an answer of negative 3 plus 5 and an answer of negative 3 minus 5. So one answer is going to be negative 3 plus 5 is 2, and negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. So those are our two answers. All right, for over here, because this isn't in parentheses, I'm going to add 11 to get x squared equal to 64. Square root of 64, so my answer here will be plus or minus 8. All right, we're still on number 1, but this is letter D. What I'm going to do is to get rid of the 3 in the denominator, I'm going to multiply by 3 to get x minus 4 squared is equal to 36. I'm going to take the square root, this x minus 4 is in parentheses, so I want to get rid of this somehow. So I'm going to get rid of it, but in order to do that, I have to take the square root of the other side. So x minus 4 is equal to plus or minus 6. So if I add 4, my two answers are going to be 4 plus 6 and 4 minus 6. So I get 10 and negative 2. Over here, let me change color. Let's do this. I'm going to divide by 20. Now careful here because some people are going to say 4. But that's 20 divided by 5. This is 5 divided by 20. This is actually 1/4. Or you could do 0.25. Right? Yep. Yep. All right, so what I'm going to do next is, again, because this x plus 1 is in the parentheses, I'm going to take the square root of that. So I'm just going to write x plus 1, but that means I have to take the square root of 1/4. So I still have x plus 1. I'm going to get plus or minus. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. So I actually have plus or minus 1/2. Subtract 1. And I get x is equal to half minus 1 is negative 1/2. Negative half minus 1 is negative 1.5. All right, so I want to go back and let's take a look at letter B. I just want to show you that there's another way to do this last part here. So right down here, when I did plus or minus 5 minus 3, and I wrote negative 3 plus or minus 5, another way to do that is we could say 5 minus 3 and then negative 5 minus 3. We would still get 2 and negative 8. And same thing for letters D and E. I did 4 plus 6 and 4 minus 6. You could also do 6 plus 4 and negative 6 plus 4 and get the same answers. And same thing for letter E. You could flip those around in a way. You could do negative 1 plus a half. You could do negative 1 minus a half. And you'd still get the same thing. So you just got to make sure you get the plus or minus part in there somehow. All right, letter F. I am going to divide. Actually, first I'm going to subtract 5. Now, negative 195 minus 5, if you do it on a calculator, is actually negative 200. Then I'm going to divide everything by negative 2. I get x minus 7 squared is equal to 100. I'm going to take the square root so that I get x minus 7 is equal to plus or minus 10. I'm going to add 7. So my two solutions will be x is equal to, and this is what I was talking about. We got to have a positive and a minus 10 in these equations somehow. So let's do 10 plus 7, and then we also have negative 10 plus 7. So our two answers would be 17 or negative 3. For letter G, I'm going to add 6. We get 2x plus 1 in parentheses squared is equal to 25. I'm going to take the square root. So I get 2x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus 5. I'm going to subtract 1. So 2x is, I'm going to do plus or minus 5 minus 1, and then I'm going to have to divide that by 2. So my two answers are going to be 5 minus 1 divided by 2 and negative 5 minus 1 divided by 2. 5 minus 1 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. Negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6, divided by 2 is negative 3. So 2 and negative 3. Moving on to number 2, which of the following is a solution set to the equation? So we basically just have to solve this and figure out the two answers. Or what you could do is you could store one of the choice. There are two choices for each of these. You could store. In fact, let's do it that way. Just to do a little calculator work. So we're going to store 0 store for x. All right, and then we're going to type in this equation. So x minus 6 squared divided by 2 plus 4. So I'm going to do x minus 6 squared divided by 2 plus 4. And then I'm going to test. So test is second math. Is that equal to 36? So I get a 0, which means that that doesn't work. So we know it's not choice number 1. So we don't even have to do 12. But now let's test negative 4. All right, I'm going to go a little faster. Negative 4 store x. I'm going to repeat the entry. So no, not that one. All right, now let's test negative 2. So negative 2 store x. All right, negative 2 works, but if you notice, right, choices 3 and 4 have negative 2. So now let's test 16. 16 doesn't work, so that must mean that it's choice number 4. Now if you wanted to, you could go on and test 14, but Pretty sure that's going to work. Solve each of the following quadratic equations by using inverse operations. Express each of your answers in simplest radical form. So my guess is that these aren't going to be nice numbers coming out like we had for the first 6 or 7. In any case, same process, just you're going to see half x squared is equal to 4. I'm going to multiply by 2, or you could say divide by a half to get x squared. Now 4 divided by a half, or 4 times 2, both give you 8. So x is the square root of 8. Now, if you remember simplest radical form, I might not do it every single time, but 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. I have a pair of 2's, which I can bring on the outside. We still have the plus or minus, so plus or minus 2, square root 2. All right, for letter B, so this is number 3B, because this is in parentheses, I'm going to do x minus 5 and then take the square root of the other side. So my answer is going to be, I'm going to add 5. I'm sorry, skip that step. It's the square root of 18 plus 5. But the square root of 18 is plus or minus. If you do 18, you get, oops, not a lot. 9 times 2, 3 times 3. So it's 2 times 3 times 3, pair of 3's. So 3 on the outside, 2 on the inside, plus 5. And that actually would be your answer, plus or minus 3 radical 2 plus 5. Seems like it shouldn't be an answer, but it is. All right, subtract 7. 2x squared is equal to 71 minus 7 is 64. Divide by 2. X squared equals 32. So x is the square root of 32. So 32 is 2 times 16, 2 times 8, 2 times 4, 2 times 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2's. So that means I can bring out, so plus or minus, I can bring out 2 times 2, which is 4, and then radical 2. All right, getting a little more complicated. All right, subtract 37. We get 5 times x, come on now, plus 2 squared is equal to 450. We're going to divide by 5. Cancels these out. X plus 2 squared is equal to 90. Take the square root. All right, so x plus 2 is going to be plus or minus. If I bring out, if I do that whole process, 90 is 9 times 10, all that stuff, it'd be 3 radical 10. And then subtract 2, my final answer would be x is equal to plus or minus 3 radical 10 minus 2. That's actually my answer in simplest radical form. All right, for this one, I'm going to subtract 8. I get x minus 4 squared divided by 3 equals 9. I'm going to multiply by 3 to get x minus 4 squared is equal to 27. Take the square root. Square root of 27. 27 is 3 times 3 times 3, so it would be plus or minus. Sorry, let me get the plus or minus in there. Eventually, there we go. Plus or minus 3 root 3. If I add 4 to that, I get x is equal to plus or minus 3 radical 3 plus 4. And that's my answer in simplest radical form. All right, the height h of an object above ground in feet can be modeled as a function of time t in seconds using the equation, all of that, as long as t is greater than or equal to 0. Find the time in seconds when the object reaches the ground, so when h equals 0. So this is saying what we need to do is set negative 16 t minus 2 squared plus 400 equal to 0, and then solve it. So I'm going to subtract 400. Negative 16 t minus 2 squared is equal to negative 400. Divide by negative 16. T minus 2 squared is equal to, I think that's 25, yep. So if I take the square root, I get t minus 2 is equal to square root of 25. So t minus 2 is plus or minus 5. If I add 2, I'm going to have 5 plus 2 and 5, I'm sorry, negative 5 plus 2. So there's the plus 5, the minus 5, and add 2. This add 2 isn't the plus or minus part. It's the plus or minus is with a 5. So my two answers could be 7 or negative 3. But if we're talking about an object above ground and t is time, negative 3 would be negative 3 seconds, which means we'd be going back, in, time, which we can't do right now. We don't have the technology. So find out, anyway, so this one doesn't make sense. So it's 7 seconds. All right, find all times when the object is at a height of 200 feet. Round your answer to the nearest tenth of a second. So I'm going to run out of room here, but basically this is saying when negative 16 t minus 2 squared plus 400 equals 200. So same process, I'm going to subtract 400. I'm going to try to save a little room here. I get negative 200. Divide by negative 16. And I believe that's going to give me 12.5. Right, 200 divided by 6. Yep. All right, so if I take the square root, it's going to be plus or minus 12.5. And then I'm going to add 2. So my two answers, I'm going to skip down to here. I'm going to have 12.5 plus 2, and I'm going to have negative 12.5 plus 2. Oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot the square root here. The square root of 12.5. And then negative the square root of 12.5. All right, so that means I'm going to do this on my calculator. So let me show you this. I'm going to do the square root of 12.5 and then plus 2. So 5.5 seconds. Instead, round to the nearest tenth. And then the negative of that. So negative square root 12.5 plus 2. So I get, again, negative 1.5 doesn't make sense in the context of this problem because we can't have negative time, but here it is, negative 1.5. So 5.5 seconds. All right, I believe this is the last one. Which of the following choices represents the zeros of the function g of x equals 2 times in parentheses x minus 5 squared minus 400? So this is asking, where does this equal 0? So I'm going to add 400. I'm going to divide by 2. I'm going to take the square root. So my two answers are going to be plus or minus the square root of 200 plus 5. Now that's not a choice. So how they have it is it looks like they have the 5 in front. Okay, so plus 5 means positive 5. Plus or minus, let's see here, 200 is 2 times 100. That's 10 times 10. 2 times 5, 2 times 5. So I have a pair of 2's and a pair of 5's, which means on the outside I can bring out a 2 times 5 or a 10, and I'm left with a radical 2. Is that a choice? 5 plus or minus 10 radical 2. Yep, it's choice number 1. Now, I would also, another way to do that is to use your calculator to do this and get a decimal, and then see which choice up here would equal the same decimal on your calculator. So it's an alternative way to do that last part. But hopefully everyone's doing all right. Hopefully this is a help. Let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully see you soon.